So since we've been spending the time drawing in perspective, learning about how perspective works, we want to now think about how would you draw a room in perspective. So the very first things that you want to think about doing is we're going to start with holding your paper this way, as I said before, that's being held horizontal. Don't hold it vertical. And we're going to put a rectangle in the middle here. Don't make the rectangle really, really, really large, but kind of towards the middle. And again, these are notes to help you be able to think about when it comes time for you to draw your own room, what it would look like. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm setting this up so that I can draw. I want to have room on the bottom and the top and the side. So I don't want my rectangle huge, but I want it big enough that I can see it. And the rectangle that we're drawing is going to represent a back wall. That's what we're doing. We're doing a rectangle that's going to represent a back wall. So I'm going to eyeball kind of the center where I want it to be, more or less. So I'm setting this up now. I'm using a pencil again to work with. Do this in pencil, don't do this in pen. Okay, so there's the bottom. Now I have to decide how big I want my rectangle to be. Don't make it really narrow like that, but you want to come up and open it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm taking a look like this, setting this up. And then I'm going to connect to make my rectangle. My lines are different sizes. So what I can do is just by putting my ruler on here and making sure that it's straight up and down, I can decide where I want my rectangle to end. If you measured these identically, then you can just connect them. Okay, depends on what you did. I didn't measure them exactly. I was eyeballing things. So what I'm doing right now is I am just using my ruler to get it kind of straight. And again, I'm sort of eyeballing things again. And I also am lucky enough that I have a grid on my table surface that I'm working on, so that will work. Okay, so there's my wall. Now I've got a couple of areas that are overdraws. If you have something like that, before you go on, please erase the overdraws, okay? Now, if you remember when we were doing the other perspective drawing, that does happen. All right, next step you want to do, you want to find the middle of that rectangle. The way you would do that, put your ruler in the corners, go diagonal, and again, basic stuff from geometry, if you remember geometry, light line. You don't want a heavy line, because we're just trying to find the middle. Light line. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see. If you notice, there is a cross in the center. Where it crosses, that's the vanishing point. So put a dot there, and then get rid of the extra lines. You don't need them. You want to get rid of those. You want the dot, but you want to get rid of those. Okay. So now I've got the back wall drawn in place. And what I want to do now is I want to extend from the corners of the wall, the four corners here, out. And what will happen is you extend from here out, from here out, using the vanishing point. That becomes your floor. Do the same thing up here, out, and that becomes your ceiling. So you're going to do that for the four corners. So on the vanishing point, on the corner, don't draw from the vanishing point, but start on the corner and draw right off the page. Same thing down below here. And if you remember, when we were doing roads and stuff, we kind of drew them right off the page. Similar. Right off the page. And depending on where you put your rectangle, your floor area might be bigger or smaller than your ceiling. It just depends on where you put it on your paper. So again, I'm going to draw off. Find the vanishing point, corner, start at the corner, and draw off. All right, so now what have we got? We have got what amounts to be a floor, a ceiling, and two walls. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to think about placing a doorway. And what we want to do is over here, we want to put a door. So in order to set that up, you want to make sure that if that's a wall, you don't want your door going all the way up. You want to kind of shorten it. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking my ruler. I'm making sure I've got a line that's parallel to this line right here. And I decide I'm going to put my door probably over here. So I'm going to set that up. And I'm going to draw up a line. Now, if you want your door to be narrow, you can just draw a line on the other side of your door, which is absolutely fine. Don't even move the ruler. Just draw it here, over here. That works great. You can also shift the ruler and decide. Since I'm making a narrow door, I'm going to use the other side of my ruler to draw from. So I've got these two vertical lines. Now, I want to attach one of these two lines to the vanishing point. And depending on where your door is, your line could be more straight, it could tip down, or it could tip up, depending on what you did with your door. So I am going here, and I'm going to go to my outside line. There it is. And I'm going to connect. And I'm on my vanishing point there. That's the top of my door. So I've got a little bit of an overdraw. I can get rid of that overdraw. So the other thing you can think about doing is, for example, putting a doorknob in. We talked about doing a doorknob, letting somebody know it's a door. You can put a window in the door pretty easily by deciding where your window is going to be. Start by deciding how wide the window is in the door. Two little vertical lines. And now I'm going to do the top of the window, vanishing point to my line, connect, vanishing point right there, top of line, connect. And now I have a window, little overdraw, I can get rid of that. So now I've got a window in the door. The other thing you can try to do is putting a window over here, an actual window. So in order to do that again, you don't want to have your window all the way to the floor or all the way to the ceiling, kind of center it. So I'm going to use the ruler, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two vertical lines. Okay, I decided I'm going to do my window right about here. So we're going to do a line coming up, and it's going to end right there. And then I'm going to decide how big I want my window to be. I can come over, and I'm going to draw a line parallel to it. Now I've got my two parallel lines. Now I'm going to hook it up to my vanishing point, top of one of the lines, connect. Now it's going to tip up because that part's below one of my lines. Make sure you see the vanishing point on the same side of the ruler and the end of your line on the same side of the ruler, and connect. That gives me a window. And if you look, you can see how it's starting to give you that feeling like you can walk in. This is what artists starting in the Renaissance were deciding, that if they could create a lifelike space on a piece of paper, it made you feel like you could walk into the room. So you can also add detail to your windows by doing separations in the windows if you want to. So I'm going to put a couple of dots, same way we put detail on the side of the buildings. I've got a dot there. This is so I can do individual panes of glass in my window. Take one back, take another one back. And again, I'm not drawing right from my vanishing point, but I'm using that as the guide on my ruler. I'm just drawing where I need it. So now I've separated that window into two. And if I want to do two in the other direction, I put a dot, make sure that I am parallel to here. Draw up, come over, make sure my lines are now parallel to each other. Don't let them slope. In this case, you want them to be parallel. Just remember, vertical lines are going to stay vertical. And now I've divided up my window. And you can see that how my window is divided up. Another great thing to do when you're trying to do a perspective drawing is by putting a floor in here. That floor that either has like wooden boards coming across it or a checkerboard. I'm going to use a checkerboard as if it was a tile floor, and that looks really great. So again, I'm going to take my ruler, and I want to break this line up into even segments. So by putting this ruler on here, I drew that at 5 inches. So I could put a mark at every inch. That's going to give me my 5 lines to work with. But I'm going to use 1/2 inch because I want these to be a little smaller. You can do it by eye too, but I would recommend using a ruler so that you can get them nice and even. And again, I am using 1/2 inch marks. So there I've got my dots. I'm going to hold this up again so you can see. So there's my dots. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect each of these dots to the vanishing point with my ruler, and I'm going to draw off the page. And what's going to happen is this. As the ruler moves around, it's going to be like the hands on a clock. That's going to stay there, and the ruler is going to keep shifting, and it's going to be doing this. And it's going to work its way around to the point where it's going to become straight up and down. And then it's going to continue, excuse my arm, and it's going to continue over like this until finally it's like that. So it's like the hands of a clock moving around. Just remember, your ruler always stays on the vanishing point, connect to your dot, and then draw off. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to go kind of quickly because I want to get into showing you details. And again, draw them right off. Just make sure you're on the vanishing point and you're on your mark. Test. Now I've lost my vanishing point. It went under my ruler. So now I'm going to make sure I'm back. If I can put my pencil on the vanishing point and on my dot, I'm correct. And if you notice how the lines are starting to change, what they're doing, if these were floorboards in a house that's got a hardwood floor, you could just put a few separations and it would look like floorboards. If you use the same technique, in other words, I've got 1/2 inch marks. If you mark the side over here, every 1/2 inch, it'll give you a checkerboard, and that's what we're going to do. So if you haven't gotten to this stage yet in your drawing, I'm going to ask you to be putting the floor in now. So if you haven't gotten to this stage yet, I'm going to ask you to do that. You notice how my ruler is starting to move, okay? I'm coming around, lining things up, and drawing off. As long as my pencil's on the mark, my pencil's on the vanishing point, I'm good. Vanishing point and mark. That looks good. Draw off. I got one more to go. Vanishing point and my mark. And there's the floor set up like that. And you notice narrower up here because it's further away. Remember we talked about as things go back into space, they feel like they disappear, right? Down here is wider. So now this is the next step in order to turn this into a checkerboard floor. Either on this line or on this line, that's where the floor and the wall meets. You want to use the same measurement. So I used 1/4 inch. So I'm going to do the same thing, 1/4 inch on this. I'm going to use this line here to work with. And I'm going to then mark 1/4 inch. And now I'm going to draw lines that are going to be parallel to my floor. That means straight across because that's the bottom of the floor and we're doing the checkerboard and they're going to go straight across. So this line goes straight across. All right. It is a horizontal line. It's not going to any vanishing point. But I first got to mark my increments over here. And I remember to myself, I said I was going to use a 1/2 inch, and I can double check that I used a 1/2 inch, and I did, because I was talking about both 1/2 and 1/4 inches. So I had to make sure, didn't make a mistake. And I start at my corner at 0. That's my 0 right there in the corner. And then I make a mark at every 1/2 inch. So there's my 1/2 inch marks there. Now, I want to do the same thing over here because I want my lines to be straight. I can eyeball it like this by setting it up. But if you have the same measurements on this side, it makes sure that your line is straight. So I'm going to start at my corner. I'm going to slightly tip my paper so that I can do this. And again, 0 is the corner. That's where the ruler begins. All right. And I am going to make a mark every 1/2 inch. 1, 2, 3. Every 1/2 inch. And one more there. Now, if that's done right, I should be able to connect these two dots and they should look straight. It should look parallel to my line below, and it does. And you would simply make sure, get your pencil on each mark, draw across. So there's line number 1. Now, as I'm starting to come forward, the lines are going to change. All right, they're going to start to look a little longer. And they're going to be the same size, but you can also do it in a way where the lines back here are closer together. I didn't do that this time. And I think for this drawing, these notes, I'm okay with that. But if you're doing something with lots of detail, you might want these lines to be closer together. So I'm going to do just another one here. And I want to hold this up so you can see what's happening. So there, the idea of how the floor is looking. And then to turn it into a checkerboard, you would continue down here, do the rest of them. You would then decide which ones are going to be light and which ones are going to be dark, and you'd shade them in. So there is a dark, and you skip dark. And again, a blending stump or a piece of paper towel is great for making the shading on your floor. And then you alternate, just like a checkerboard. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see. I haven't blended the lines in yet. I would have to grab my blending stump to do that. But I just want you to see the basics of how the pattern looks. Okay. And again, I would fill these right in tight with a blending stump. So if I hold this up, you can sort of see what's happening with the floor, how that works, and how that's taking it back. That's one of the great things about this type of a process. It works really good. Okay, so that's the basics of setting the room up. And again, you could decide to use a checkerboard floor or not, depends. Next step is to think about things that are going to be inside the room. For example, like a desk or a bench or something like that. So if I have something that's going to be in my room, you have to remember that it's kind of sitting on the floor. So I'm going to turn my paper sideways a little bit, and I'm going to use my grid that I've got here to draw a cabinet in, okay? And I'm going to deepen some lines on here so you can see what I'm talking about. This is going to be the bottom of my cabinet, okay? Now, because that's where I'm going to put my cabinet, that's why a grid on the floor is really helpful. I'm going to come in here, and because I'm going to make a cabinet, I'm going to erase what's inside here, because now I'm overlapping. Think about when we did buildings, and when the buildings overlapped, we erased. So I'm now overlapping that floor with a cabinet. So I'm going to erase that. So now I have to think, all right, how tall is my cabinet? Where does it come up to? So I start over here. The cabinet is right up against the wall, okay? And I am going to make my line coming up, and I'm going to say my cabinet is not quite as tall as the door. It's going to go to about there. Now, I have a line that's going to come straight across, because it's going to, this line and this line are like the top and bottom of the wall, but I've got a vertical line here. Now, it might overlap this line a little bit. It might not. Let's see. Okay, it does not hide the line completely. That's good. So I'm going to come up, and I want to connect. So now I'm going to get parallel to my floor, parallel to here. I don't want it to be like this or like that. I want it to be parallel. Same measurements. It should be by eye, be able to see what's going on. And I'm checking. Looks good to my eye. And I connect. Now, I've got some more overlap. Now that that is the side of my cabinet, I now have got in here is completely overlapped. So I erase anything that I'm overlapping. I want to erase. Get a little overdraw. So now the next step is, if you notice, that's the side of the cabinet, and then it's going to come over this way. So I want to draw this line over here, and then I've got my vertical line right here. It's the same way when we did the drawing of the building below the horizon line. It works the same way. Only difference is I'm turning that into a cabinet. So I'm eyeballing where I think my line is going to stop probably about there. So I'm on my vanishing point, I'm on my corner, and I'm coming over. Now I want to go straight up and down, make sure I'm parallel to here. And again, I'm going to bear down with the pencil so you can see this. And I'm looking at where things are overlapping. I've got overlap here, I've got overlap here. I'm going to erase. Okay, and I'm going to hold this up so you can see what's happening. So there's the cabinet in the room. It could be a desk. What's left? The top. I would, because I'm below the horizon line, I would see a little bit of the top. So if you think, again, the way we drew the buildings, you would go from this corner to the vanishing point, right? And sketch that in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across like this. There it is. And I'm looking at where it's going to end probably, and I'm going to draw over. Now, I still have one more line that I've got to do, right? From the corner here, it's going to be parallel to that. So this is a great trick to do. Line your ruler up like that so it's on the line. Slide back, slide back, slide back, slide back until you get to the corner. Oh, there's the corner. Stop. And then draw over to connect. If you're sliding back and it's doing this, you can see the space is different than here. That means it's off. So you want to just slide back even, get to that corner, stop. And I can see where my guideline is here, where I'm drawing to. All right. And there's my line that I was taking towards my vanishing point. I can see I need this line here heavier. I'm going to connect and make sure that it's heavy. Draw it in. There it is. I've got a little bit more of things that are going to be hidden. So I'm going to take that out. And I've got my construction line that I did lightly. I'm taking that out. So now, if I hold this up, you can see how that looks like that's sitting in the middle of the room. And if this is a cabinet, I can then put doors in it. If it was a desk, I could open this up and turn it into the front of a desk, just the same way we did tunnels. So this could become a desk pretty easily. Let's try to do it as a desk. So I am going to open this up and turn it into a desk with the front open, okay? So I'm going to use my horizon right there. And let's take it to about like that. And I'm going to come up vertical and I'm going to turn this into a desk. So I'm making what amounts to be like a tunnel through this shape. Okay. So you can see that's going to be the area that's open in front of the desk. I made a heavy line here on the floor, but now, because now I've got a viewport going through there, I'm still going to see my floor because now what I've done is I've opened it up. So I'm going to sketch my floor back in. That was my floor tile right there, and you would see it through the desk. And there's the desk. So now you would see the floor because this desk is here and it's open. And I'm just sketching this in a little bit. And if the side of the desk is solid, then that would be it. If you had the side of the desk open, you would put another window there. I'm going to make it so that the side of the desk is solid. So that's the desk sitting there, the workstation. And I can fill that in with a blending stump and some shading, and it would look really, really good. Let me see if I've got a blending stump handy. If I don't, I will grab a paper towel and show you what I'm doing. All right, I think I am going to go with a piece of paper towel because I don't have a blending stump right handy and I want to save time. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to shade in the side of the desk, just so that I can tell that it is a solid thing. And if I'm doing my my objects in the room, some of them are going to be darker, some of them are going to be lighter, and it just allows you to show where the things are in the room. So I'm shading my desk in. And if I wanted to put stuff on top of the desk, I could do that too. Like books, a light, a computer. So if I hold this up, you should be able to get the idea what I'm talking about. Do you see how that looks? When it starts to look like a desk. So that's the idea of trying to bring three-dimensional objects in. Just think about the simple shapes first. That's the main thing. Simple shapes. And then you can turn them into anything. So if you're observing in your room and you're in like your bedroom, you could sketch the bed in just like that. The only difference would be, do you have long posts up here and it would be shorter, it would be down closer to the ground. Same thing would happen if you were like in your kitchen, you're doing kitchen cabinets going around, countertops, you would do that. So think about that type of thing. And also too, windows, when you're setting them up, if you've got another window over here, remember as they start to move this way, they get bigger. As they start to move in, they get smaller. So remember, things moving into the middle of the picture are going to become smaller. Things that are moving to the outside of the picture are going to become bigger. And you can also do lights and stuff in the ceiling. If you have ceiling panels, you can have lights hanging down and things of that nature. So that's the basics of setting up a room in one point perspective. So hopefully this is helpful to you. And as you start to work on these notes, you'll then be able to use this to help you make the decision about how you're going to draw your own room.